Hello, this is our first lecture, Week 1, Module 1. For our notes, hopefully you've been able to figure out the basics of D2L, how to download our notes, how to access them, to view online. Even if you are having a problem with that, this program allows us to view the notes as I go over our lecture. One thing that always bothered me was when teachers or professors would use notes and we'd have to sit there and rewrite all of the notes that they were using. So I am giving you my notes for a number of reasons. Why rewrite what I've already typed? This also allows you to concentrate on what I'm saying. I will do my best to add some more supplemental comments to the notes so that I'm not just talking from the notes. But it will also allow you to compile a collection of notes as a reference in the format that I use them for the class. So hopefully that will help you in some way. At least you won't have to be writing anything else other than comments or supplemental material as we go over the notes. In addition, the program that I'm using to video and discuss each lecture allows me to record 15 minutes at a time. Sometimes that will be enough to cover a section of notes because I'm only going to do one chapter at a time. So for instance in Module 1 there'll be two videos, one for my chapter that I wrote, one for Worden's introduction and his first chapters, and then the video that I have a link to, which is the last lecture, and hopefully you were able to successfully view that as well. Okay, so there will be multiple videos for each module with our notes and lectures. This is our basic introduction. Just a little bit about myself, and hopefully you will also post. There were two discussion boards this first week. One was to introduce yourself, and there were specific questions about that. And the second one is your response to your readings, the notes, the lectures, the videos. So a little bit about myself. I've been studying grief, loss, and death anxiety for 15 or 16 years now. One of my professors, Adrian Tomer, who's also a friend and co-author, got me interested in this when I was a master's student at Shippensburg University in their counselor education program. I think a few of the reasons, little personal disclosure, that I became interested in this topic was, the first reason was that my father had me when he was much older. He was in World War II and served in the military for most of his life, and then the government. And when he got back from World War II, he was at a later point in his life, and so he was in his mid-40s when I was born. He was older than a lot of the other parents of my friends who were very young. And I think that always gave me an awareness of mortality. And I lost both my father and my mother about 2.5 years ago, both within a year. They were both in hospice for about a year. And I can give some examples of that whole process and share some things with you. Another thing, when I was very young, my grandmother helped to raise me, and she died when I was about 12. So that also added to my awareness of mortality, grief, loss, death, the human condition, our developmental process, and the seasons of life. So, when I met Adrian Tomer in my counseling program, and he was studying grief, loss, and death anxiety, and we began to research that subject together. And you'll be able to read a lot of what we worked on during this course, and I'll share some of our own theories as well. I think that Worden is a wonderful resource. He gives a really nice overview of the theoretical background and history, as well as his own theory on grief, loss, death, and dying. So the first question would be, other than mortality, one's own death or the loss of another, what kind of losses do humans experience? There are traumatic losses, unexpected losses. There are anticipated losses. There are complicated losses. There are many losses that don't have anything to do with life or death. They have to do with other types of losses. So, for instance, the loss of a relationship, the loss of a career, the loss of a hope or dream, the loss of an object. And all losses are important in our lives based on the significance that the individual places on that loss. I think that everybody has different meaning. I think that for many people, for example, pets are members of the family. Mine are. And the loss of a pet is significant. And they may go through a very similar grieving process. Same with the loss of a relationship or a career or a dream. C.S. Lewis wrote something that really impacted me. And when we think about life and death, I believe that without death, life would not have the same meaning. We know that we are on earth for a finite amount of time. And knowing that we will not live forever, that our loved ones will not be with us forever, it adds an urgency. It adds meaning to the time that we have. It makes the time we have more precious. C.S. Lewis said, the more one loves, the more sorrow one experiences surrounding loss. So, the more we love, the more grief we experience, the more meaning that is associated with that relationship and that loss. And Tolstoy wrote, only people who are capable of loving strongly can also suffer great sorrow. But this same necessity of loving serves to counteract their grief and heals them. And that's a very positive reframe. What about people who are not experiencing sorrow when they lose a loved one? What might be happening? And so we know there are different stages and experiences. Many times in our modern society, doctors prescribe medication, and that often numbs us to the experience of grief and loss. I believe personally that the only way we can personally deal with grief and loss is to move through that grieving process. We can't skip over it. We can't avoid it. And that is a meaningful process unto itself. It's a growing process. In some ways it brings us closer to the individual that is no longer with us, or the relationship, or the dream, or whatever it might be. But it helps us to process not only the loss, but the meaning of that relationship in our own lives. So, yes, there are definitely valid times for medication. However, when an individual takes some type of medication to deal with grief and loss, and they stop taking that medication, maybe a year later, maybe 2, maybe more, they often realize that their grieving process will begin all the way back where it was stalled or stopped. There's lots of other reasons why people might not experience sorrow or grieving. Perhaps it's too traumatic of an experience and they become numb, or the emotions become suppressed or repressed. Perhaps it's too much all at once. Perhaps there is an aspect of post-traumatic stress or shock. If people become stuck in the grieving process, or if they experience anxiety or depression, then it may be the result of complicated grieving. And throughout this course, we're going to talk about ways in which we could deal with complicated grieving. So many believe that if they are stuck in the grieving process, that they're not moving on in some way. And there are a lot of psychological reasons for that that we will be able to talk about. There may be physical or other mental symptoms or implications resulting from emotional grief. A lot of studies have examined conjugal bereavement, or the loss of a spouse, and how that affects individuals physically, somatically, or emotionally. And remember, psychosomatic symptomology is when we experience physical symptoms resulting from psychological issues. Masked grief, or facsimile illness, is when a survivor may develop symptoms like those experienced by the loved one before death. They're also considered somatic. I'm going to end this segment of our video. This is part 1, and we will continue with part 2 of our lecture notes.